Hello, my name is Brian Dion, and I'm the author of this collection of short stories called The Loose Ends. And today I'm going to read from my collection one of my favorite stories called Oil and Drool. And in this story we see King Herod the Great at his very last moments. We sometimes think of politicians today as questionable in their behavior, but King Herod brings bad behavior to a new level, believe me, as I think you will see in this story. Oil and Drool. Am I in Sheol? The dying man asked. Not yet, answered the spirit that floated above his bed. It smells like Sheol. What the dying man smelled was his own putrefying body and the gangrene moving up his legs, now between his legs, the agony and itching boring into his soul. If he had a soul, which was uncertain. It would be better if he hadn't. You are in your own bed, the spirit explained, in Jericho. In Jericho? That piss-hole! The dying man struggled to sit up, but the pain was too much. He fell back, panting. Masada, that's where I am, right? The fumes, the heaviness of the air. I am no fool. I know the salt sea when I smell it. Without answering, the spirit slowly began to drift. The dying man cried out, Did I say you could leave? A physician stood beside the dying man and wiped his brow, then moved to soak up the drool pooling on his chin. The dying man pushed the hand aside. Spirit, I command you to stay. The spirit would not be commanded. Nevertheless, she hovered and paused. And don't think I don't know that voice. The dying man thrust an accusatory finger into the air. I have heard it many times. I know you. Still, the spirit would not answer. Known to the outside world as Herod the Great, the dying man violently grabbed hold of the physician's arm. Do you think this is a child's puppet show? No one is to be by my bedside except my inner circle. Did I not make myself clear? Occasionally Herod's pronouncements were lucid, but often they were not. And it was a challenge beyond the skills of a stuttering Greek physician to know which were which. Great Lord Herod, the physician asked, whom do you wish us to remove from the room? Look at her, Herod declared, pointing up. Butter would not melt in her mouth, nor will she speak when commanded. One of Herod's eyes was swollen almost shut. It made his face even more threatening than usual. Was it you who let her in? No, great lord, the physician answered. There is only the inner circle as you directed. Helplessly, the physician followed Herod's finger to the ceiling. Send her away at once. The physician's name was Socrates, and at this moment he might have welcomed a cup of hemlock if it were offered. Desperately, he looked for intervention from someone in the inner circle. None was forthcoming. Herod's two sons shrugged and smirked. The king's sister simply shook her head. Shoo, shoo, Socrates said, moving his hands in a vaguely circular motion, hoping this was an appropriate gesture for exorcising apparitions. No, wait, Herod cried out. The spirit shall not leave before explaining her presence. Again, Herod attempted to sit up. He screamed in agony, but would not be denied. Regal orders demanded a regal posture. Spirit, I say, what do you want with me? Tell me who you are. The spirit moved closer, hovering just out of reach. Why do you torment me? There could be no mistaking the face. It was a beautiful face, an extraordinary face, a face that, even after all these years, haunted Herod's dreams. His one true love, Mariamne, whom circumstances beyond his control had forced him to execute. Mariamne, the king cried, turning his head, looking away. Spittle and blood fell onto his pillow. Socrates moved to wipe the king's lips, but again was pushed away. How was I to know, Mariamne? How? Everywhere a king is surrounded by enemies. How was I to know? The expressions on the faces of the two brothers changed from snickers to sneers. It all happened long before their time, but they knew the story well. How their half-brother Antipater had spread rumors about the loyalty of the king's golden boys, Alexander and Aristobulus. And good old Antipater, firstborn, but not first in succession, not content with simply ruining the hopes of Mariamne's sons, did in Mariamne herself. He accused her of adultery. There could be only one end to this story. Herod the Great executed all three of them. The boys first, then their mother. "Mariamne!" Herod cried out again, sobbing and spitting up more blood. "Forgive me, Mariamne. It was Antipater who made me do it. Damn the boy! Lies! Lies! Nothing but lies! Why will no one tell me the truth?" The two brothers, not sons of Mariamne, of course, neither the first nor the second, looked on in restrained amusement. The old man was dying. Of this there could be no doubt. But the will was not in force quite yet. Neither Archelaus nor Antipas wanted, at the last moment, to upset their prospects. Archelaus whispered to his younger brother, "Antipas, do you know what they say about him in Rome?" Antipas snorted. "I imagine they say many things. They say better to be Herod's pig than his son." The saying was as true as it was comic, but until the old man rested safely in his tomb, they must maintain at least the appearance of mournful offspring. In the mind of Antipas, it was this obsession with offspring that was the heart of all the family's troubles. The old man simply could not give his royal member a rest. Married 10 times, sired 8 sons that Antipas knew of, plus half a dozen daughters. Did he expect the sons would somehow learn to get along? It drove Antipas to distraction, how people would go on and on about what a clever administrator his father was, how he had the Romans in the palm of his hand, how he had consolidated his kingdom, how Herod's great building projects had endeared him to the people. Endeared? Really? The man was a monster, and getting worse with age. If only they would give the reins to Antipas, he would show them how to run a kingdom. Archelaus turned to look at his brother, who, as usual, seemed lost in a daydream. Poor old deluded Antipas, the good brother, as he was fond of calling himself. He had no idea. Herod had made a new will only the day before. Safely hidden behind a curtain, Archelaus had overheard the whole business. He struggled not to laugh as he heard his father dictate new terms to a trembling Greek scribe. The new will stipulated that his little brother, who had long regarded himself as the rightful heir, would now receive but a small portion of the kingdom. Galilee, a backwater. Meanwhile, Judea and Idumea would go to Archelaus. "Mariamne!" the great king cried out, reaching up into the air, longing for an embrace. And then the spirit did something very unexpected. It divided itself in two. Herod was confused at first, but soon the meaning became clear. Above him floated both Mariamnes, wives 2 and 3. A new flood of tears washed down the king's pockmarked face. "Mariamne! Oh, my Mariamnes! If only you had said something! If only Antipater!" The king couldn't finish. His grief was too great, and his agony rose to a level he formerly could not have imagined. Recalling his family's sordid history, Antipas could only shake his head. The palace intrigues in Rome had nothing on his father's. It wasn't enough he should kill his beautiful Mariamne, but then he took to wife a second Mariamne, also a beauty. King Herod clearly had some regrets about how he'd handled things with his first Mariamne. He seemed determined to behave better. He fathered another son and called him Herod II, making his intentions for the boy transparent. Antipas's prospects might have ended then and there, before he was even conceived, had it not been for firstborn Antipater once again sowing doubts, his particular genius. In several subtle ways, Antipater sullied the reputation of young Herod, the so-called second. Best of all, though, and here Antipas could not restrain the full smile that lit up his face, his good old half-brother Antipater finally ran out of patience and tried to poison the king. Poison, a woman's weapon. Did he really imagine the king, with all his spies, would not uncover the plot? Apparently, Mariamne II knew about the plot as well, though she did not share this knowledge with her husband. Antipas smiled grimly and shook his head. The woman should have counted herself lucky to escape with her life. And her son, too, for that matter. Herod II was not involved in the attempted assassination. He was living in Rome at the time. Nevertheless, his mother's disgrace doomed any hopes he had for future advancement. Mother and son were exiled to Gaul, a backwater if ever there was one. So, who was left? Antipas, of course, the good brother. He understood well enough that he would have to give his older brother something, some position of importance or apparent importance, but what Israel needed above all was a steady hand and head. Antipas had both. Confident and ruthless, the two brothers turned to look at each other, smiling for entirely different reasons. "Doctor!" Herod cried out. "The pain! It's worse!" The king reached up to grab the physician's tunic, using all his strength to hold on. "They told me you were the best. They were wrong. You have done nothing for me." Gently, Socrates lifted the royal fingers from his tunic. "Lord Herod, there is one other thing we could try. Anything. A hot oil bath to help restore balance in your humors. Do it!" "It is already prepared, Your Excellency." Quickly, 2 Idumenean slaves helped the king from his bed. A 6-legged monster, they staggered toward a tub. Rising hot vapors added a new layer of mist to Herod's already milky vision. The 2 Mariamnes continued to float above him, tantalizingly just out of reach. "Mariamne!" Herod cried out, but more faintly now, his cries interspersed with coughs and spits. They stripped the king of his robes. He was more spoiled meat than man. With the greatest of efforts, he lifted one discolored leg, then the other. The slaves guided him into the greasy liquid. Herod screamed in pain. His legs were on fire. So too were his eyes as he looked up at the 2 Mariamnes who were smiling at him, 2 tranquil phantoms. Then they turned and kissed one another on the lips. "Ah!" Herod screamed, the pain unbearable. Hand in hand, the 2 Mariamnes gently began to recede. Following them were Herod's 2 beautiful boys, Alexander and Aristobulus, their heads remarkably reattached. "My sweet, sweet boys!" Herod cried, his voice thin and cracking. "I was wrong about you. How was I to know?" All Herod's limbs were screaming, and his scalp seemed ready to ignite. A messenger came rushing to his side. "Your Excellency, I bring news." Herod's teeth were chattering, as if he were encased in ice. "What news?" "It has been accomplished, my lord. Just as you commanded. All Bethlehem's male infants have been killed." Herod could vaguely remember some such thing. The details eluded him. "And we did this because?" "Because of the prophecy that a new king of the Jews would be born there." Herod nodded his head. It took a concerted effort and all the focus he could manage. "Well," he said, looking not at the messenger, but straight up, wondering if he would ever again see his two Miriamnes. "That's that, then." "I regret, Your Excellency, we had no success in tracking down the Magi." Herod squeezed his eyes shut, partly in pain, partly in frustration. Not every plan could be brought to fruition. "And the 200? What about the 200? Only Herod's sister seemed to make sense of this reference. She came to her brother's side. "All in our custody, Lord Herod, only waiting the sad moment of your passing. And then they shall be killed, as you instructed, dear brother." Herod managed one final nod. He was not sure he could manage another. "And then there shall be mourning throughout the land," not rejoicing as he feared. Herod looked back at his two sons. From this distance he could not tell who was whom. "You'll be happy to see the last of me, won't you, boys?" There was no answer. Herod let his head slip beneath the oil.